Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see me. I hope you can hear me. I'm going to take this video off there now. I want to welcome you to the latest episode of. Oh, we seem to have some glitching going on here. Latest episode of Stepping Up from TAtech. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. We have carried on that tradition with our guest today, Antonia. Good afternoon. How are you? Oh, could you unmute your microphone, please? Oh, it was on. It's not on now. Bear with us a second. While Antonia's trying to fix her microphone, I'll just tell you a little bit about the purpose of Stepping Up. Stepping Up is a program where what we want to do is to not only delve deeply into technology companies in the recruitment space and the people behind them, but have a peek behind the curtain and find out what brought them to this point and to understand them in a way that you don't normally get to do so. So thank you very much for joining me, Antonia, this afternoon. Can we hear you now?
Hello?
Loud and clear. That's
Oh,
perfect.
that's great. Hi. So sorry about that. Typical,
That's
isn't
okay.
it?
Isn't technology marvelous?
Love technology.
Yeah. So, Antonio, first of all, sorry, I should re-say that again. Antonia, my apologies. Thanks for coming on. I spoke with you recently about Lumenai, and it's an area that I'm endlessly fascinated in. So we will definitely digress in terms of what we're going to talk about this afternoon. So apologies to you and to everyone else if I go off on one. But by way of introduction, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and Lumenai, just to get us going, first of all?
Okay, so I come from a history of working in schools and assessment. So for a long period of time, I worked for Pearson, a massive assessment provider, sort of exam board, writing assessments and delivering them. Lumenai is based on the premise that 85% of career success is based on behaviors. And from my point of view, when I was looking into this, it's like, where are the standards in these behaviors? And coming from a background where everything is about standards, it was a kind of no-brainer to put all this stuff together, to look at the academia around what would be considered soft skills or behavioral skills, human skills. I mean, I think this area is kind of opaque because there aren't any clear standards around it, or certainly they haven't come into the workplace yet. And so Lumenai was founded on that basis. It was looking at where we can find standards in behaviors and where we can combine that with standards in key things around sort of business governance or business processes like strategic leadership, and then using a lot of academia around assessment methodology. So it's the combination of all that equals Lumenai.
So for background, we should, I suppose, define what we're talking about in terms of behaviors as opposed to learned skills, hard skills, and so on. And what would those be? What kind of behavioral skills are we looking to identify and learn about from people?
Yeah, so we did loads of research around this. So I think the easiest way to define it is in what people would call soft skills.
Yeah.
Kind of got your hard skills, your sort of technical learnt skills, your academic skills, which are sort of, how we see the CV, I suppose. Yeah. And then if you jump to that section of the CV where people are listing their other skills, such as communication, critical thinking, and things generally made up or endorsed through, networks or self-assessment. And we're essentially saying is if you look at that part of the CV, there are no clear standard frameworks around how people list those qualities about themselves. And that's where we come into this marketplace.
So in terms of the value of content on a CV, you would promote that area to be more important than it is buried away in the additional skills area, where what we're looking at is not just not where someone has worked and what they've done and what tasks they've done and maybe what achievements they have, but those soft skills that talk to how someone can be in the future, so that their ability to learn, to adapt, to work in teams, to be creative, and to be a leader.
Yeah, I think we're not quite as hardcore as some people who say the CV is dead. I think that would be a shame. I think we stand on the shoulders of a lot of essentially human marketing. Who am I? What do I bring to a job? How do you know that? How do you validate that? And so the kind of missing part of that. So we're not saying we're replacing it. We're saying, hey, there's let's say 85% of untapped value in a CV, which is I'm listing all these qualities about myself. And actually, it's a use case we're developing at the moment is someone who's like really getting frustrated. It's the hybrid and remote. They're recruiting, but the skills that these people are listing about them, I am a good communicator, and so forth, are maybe not necessarily as true as they'd like them to be. So we come in that area, which is, hey, let's have a really good look at this, and let's look at a standards framework around it, and what would happen if we validated that.
Yeah, I had a company about 10 years ago where we sold psychometric assessments, and one of the real valuable things to me in people who were going through those assessments were the abbreviated reports that they would get immediately after. It was an assessment that you could take on your phone, and it would take 10 minutes to do. But the report that came back to the individual informed them about skills and abilities and aptitudes that they perhaps weren't fully aware of. And bearing in mind that well, I'm in the UK. You're still in the UK, aren't you?
Yes.
So we're both well versed on the British sensibilities of maybe a lack of self-awareness, a lack of awareness of what those skills are, or maybe a bashfulness about showing off about them. So if someone has great leadership skills, it's quite common that they don't say it out loud. I'll leave that for others to judge. But in terms of knowing yourself, in terms of knowing what your capabilities are, then that's especially valuable for an individual when they're thinking about, well, what career path could I be taking? What types of roles could I take? And of course, conversely, employers, when they're aware of that about an individual, they can think in much more practical terms about, well, how will this person fit into the team? How will they augment what we have here already? And how can they progress through the organization? If we're going to invest in this person, then it's not just to do this job today, but perhaps to be, someone who's going to grow through the company.
Yeah, I think the first thing to say though is what is strategic leadership, or I think that we have to bring a context to this. So this idea, so it's been really interesting. So we're early stage, and in our MVP validation, there was a lot of assessment anxiety, which I think is perfectly understandable, and that might come from school. And there was also a lot of assumptions around this idea of I'm a good communicator. And it's like, this is a context-based thing. Like, you may be a good communicator in one context and maybe not in another. And I think about looking at how we look at the whole thing academically, but then make it user-friendly, because there is a value. I come from a highly academic background, and education is all about standards and outcomes and measurements, and in a way, for me, it's very alien to come into an environment where this doesn't exist, or it exists in a patchy or kind of, let's say, an entrepreneurial way. And it's not to devalue what's out there. There's a lot of great stuff out there. But I think what we're really aiming to do is to bring rigor to this idea of what this skill set framework is. So what communication? Let's just take communication. What is it? What is it in different contexts? And how do we start thinking about that? And there's huge amounts of academia about this type of stuff. But how do we translate that into user-friendly tech? Let's say. And so from my point of view, once you've done that, then suddenly you have a standards framework, and suddenly you have a way of measuring these skill capabilities in different contexts. And then from that, you can actually create an ecosystem. And this is, I think, a way of thinking about this is a lot of people talk about the skill ontology, but maybe there isn't a broader academic framework around how this skills ontology exists. So all we're trying to do is say, we really need to roll this back a bit, and we really need to start dissecting what these skills are, how we measure them, what context they exist in. And once you have that, then what is the ecosystem? What is this skills ecosystem? Once we make this 85% of untapped value, behavioral skills, untapped value available to, let's say, candidates and organizations, how does that change recruitment? How does that change, looking, for instance, at talent identification, how that could inform your recruitment process because you're interested in building effective teams?
Yeah. So going back to the academic side of things, where you're saying that things need to be validated and measurable. Your platform, correct me if I'm wrong, is you refer to it as the Luminator. How do you, when people are going through the platform, how do you ensure accuracy and consistency so that the results are as close to accurate as possible and repeatable on a regular basis? If I took the assessment today, next week, next year, would my results be consistent and equally accurate?
Okay, so this is really interesting because you come into assessment methodology, and we're looking here at qualitative data. So I'm going to try and not be technical.
No,
You
no,
know,
no. If I'm in the wrong, then totally tell me. I'm
you're
not.
certainly not in the wrong. It's just about sort of bringing into awareness how assessment methodology works.
Yeah.
And you have two types of assessment methodology. If we're being really simplistic about it, you have the quantitative, you know, the 1 + 1 = 2, and then you have the qualitative. And you know, we have sons and daughters who go to school. We've been schooled ourselves, and we've been graded in arts and humanities subjects. This is a qualitative assessment methodology. And what it looks at is building consensus around what a standard might be. So
Yeah.
this consensus modeling is a really important way of achieving a set of standards around something that may be a bit more amorphous or opaque. In a way, we all understand what 1 + 1 = 2 means, so we can have a conversation without misunderstanding each other. So the way we create standards around it is we look at how we can build a qualitative assessment around what these skills are, such that we can create measurements that then create a standard in how we measure what is communication in a strategic leadership context. That means that we can have a conversation about communication in a strategic leadership context and understand what each other means, because we have a measurement framework around that means we are clear around what we are looking at, what we understand, and how we then converse about it. And then further, in an organizational context, how you'd apply that in the context of talent identification, or in the context of recruitment, or even in employer branding, because I think this has a strong application there too.
So, to what degree is there a big job of education required for employers who are going to be using your platform? How do you make sure that they're understanding the definitions that are talked about in the reports from your assessments?
I think what we've done, and this is why Lumenai exists, it's a way, so we're very user-friendly, and what we're trying to do is kind of create user-friendly illustrations of skill capabilities. So essentially, at some point, you're going to be able to read a Lumen. So just the other day, I have an intern, and she's research and partnerships, and she's bringing in some of her friends, because it's around a DEI issue that she's looking into. And when we measured one of her friends, and we looked at the Lumen, the output, and we could see similarities and differences, and we could have a conversation around understanding we were visually literate, let's say, in the Lumenai way of measuring the skills. So essentially what we're trying to do is create a very accessible way of understanding this. And so if you're not really into the academic side of stuff, it doesn't really matter. It's just about onboarding you into the process of how you use these tools to accelerate the things that you do within your organization in relation to recruitment. And in essence, it shouldn't be a complicated process. That's why we're here.
So how, in practical terms, if we had candidate X, or a person who went through the Luminator, sorry, that sounded dismissive, what was in with my hands there, but someone who went through the assessment, what would the report look like? What would be the terminology that would be said about an example person who had been through an assessment?
So this is a key thing. We did a lot of sort of stakeholder engagement about this, because reporting is key. So I think first, let's look at legacy assessments. So in terms of educating the market, yes, there's lots to do. And I think the key way of thinking about this is value creation. There's a lot of noise out there. And I think some key criteria to think about in relation to looking at the value of maybe that piece of HR tech that is doing an assessment, which is, who are the key players in that organization? What are their backgrounds? And for me, you wouldn't go to a doctor who hadn't got a medical degree, and you wouldn't send your child to a school with teachers who hadn't been taught how to teach. And so my question in this space is, there's a lot of assessment technology out there, and I don't see the expertise behind it. There's always it's not to devalue it. I'm not against, there's lots of super bright, interesting stuff out there. But as an assessment specialist, I'm a bit like, where is the value here? Show me where the value is. And if it's a one-off assessment and that's it, I would call that into question myself, i.e. assessment isn't a one-off process. And if you're looking at human capability development, it's an ongoing process. So in simple terms, it's about thinking about how you can find accessible assessments that are validated, that are built by professionals in that field, who understand the particular business problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah. So are you able to if I was employer X and looking to use a platform that would be good for recruitment and internal mobility and so on, am I able to benchmark existing personnel and use that as a as a guide to then augmenting my team or supplementing my team.
Right, and then that goes back to sort of your question was also about reporting. So what we've done, we've got a really nice use case developing of an organization who used Lumenai to benchmark what they would consider their talent. So you could take the whole department, or you could take key players within your organization.
Yeah.
And we benchmarked what they think talent looks like within their organization. And then they ran that through their recruitment campaign, and we matched. They had shortlisted, so it was running against a shortlist, but you could do it for all candidates, because I do argue that maybe you don't know entirely who to shortlist until you've got data on that, more data. And it really assisted this particular organization in looking at how to map candidate talent, how to recruit into existing talent, and look at team effectiveness. So it was like an ecosystem. It wasn't you have an assessment for recruitment and you have an assessment for internal, talent mapping, or you have assessment. And it's like, actually, if assessment is done properly, you should be able to do all of this stuff together. And then learning and development fits neatly within that. So you would, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm interrupting you. So I apologize. But when running a benchmarking program, does it happen? And I might be talking nonsense here. Does it happen where you find people in roles who, with this additional information, you would realize, or the organization might realize, actually, this person is not in the optimum role for the skills that they have. You might say that they're misemployed. They could be better employed in other parts of the organization because they have skills and abilities, and maybe they're being underutilized, or they're in a role that doesn't nourish them in the job.
I think essentially what you're saying is once you start to get behavioral data, you'll start to see patterns like that emerge, and it's clear that is the case. And I think it's not just a one-off insight in that way. The more assessments that your employees do or candidates do, the more you'll be able to see how to match or move or deploy. And so in essence, what you're looking at, I was having a great conversation with someone who we're going to work in partnership with, and he was coming up with an analogy around, the team players in football, is that essentially what you're also going to see is whether you're building a team full of mavericks. And this is partly why it's very difficult to get things done, because you don't have the key linchpins holding people together who are measured. And so it's a number of things that happen at the same time. It's not just that you'd see that someone is potentially in the wrong place, that you might see the team dynamics. Suddenly you're getting data around how that team is working and why.
Yeah. Football is always a good analogy when you're talking about putting together a team and having different skills. I've heard people refer to the A team as well, where people have different skills that complement each other. But of course, and this is an issue that's also found by people in traditional psychometrics, is the issues that come up when you try to put together the magical recipe for the perfect team. Can the perfect team exist?
I think again, it's context based. I think it's like every organization has a culture, and essentially what Lumenai does is help you map what your existing culture is and how you recruit into that. So it's a win-win for everybody. And I think, coming back to reporting, what we've looked at in reporting is, the traditional way of, sort of recruitment based assessment is that you would take an assessment maybe more than once for many different organizations. You would never see that assessment as a candidate. Then the organization may never get back in touch with you or disseminate that to you. So what we've done is we've made that totally transparent. So the user gets a user account, they get automated reporting. So it's not the traditional model of you wait 3 days for a PDF to be sent through. The administrator within an organization can deploy the assessment, or they can deploy as many assessments as they want. They get immediate insight into how that assessment, when it was taken, how it was scored, if learning and development has taken place in between assessment 1 and 2. And so the idea being is it creates this transparency, and then it also creates data. So we're partnering with CV Wallet, and I think it's a great thing to talk about in terms of partnerships, because this is the future of this space, is that it's about transparent assessment that equals transparent data, and then the data will drive the recruitment process in a way that's never driven it before.
I was speaking with Beverly at CV Wallet just last week before, and I love what they're doing. I think it's fabulous. If you've got a partnership there, then I can really see the connection there. So one thing I'm really keen on is the ability to identify areas where you can train someone, where you can build their hard skills based on their existing aptitudes, and being able to identify that hidden resource, if you like, in your organization?
Okay, so I think for me that when we come to the learning and development side and training, this is a very specific thing for an organization. So
Yeah,
what we created essentially is a portal into which you could have coaching prompts, you could have your internal training content, you could be linking to free training content. So we have an employment readiness
yeah,
questionnaire that's built on a lot of the UK employment readiness standards, and that we've linked all of the learning and development for that particular questionnaire to free resources, so that it's accessible for anybody who wants to become employment ready. So I think in a way that the hard skills and the soft skills will be more entwined, but we're not attempting to tell organizations how to do that, because that's a very personal thing according to how they want to do it. But essentially what we're saying is the behavioral skills training is now accessible. It runs alongside sort of academically written context-based questionnaires that are easily accessible,
yeah.
and that they give you opportunities to fill that in with your own specific training. So essentially what we're saying is, yes, the training will be better. It will be personalized. You won't have to do generic training either. The days of sitting in a room when you have a trainer at the front and everybody is doing the same training, whether they're need it or not, is over. And so then what will happen with training is the training spend will be reduced, because suddenly you're looking at where people need training, how they need training, and how to deploy those resources around that. So it's going to become this complete ecosystem in that context.
I used to give a regular talk, which was partly comical just for fun, but there was an element of seriousness with it, where it was called the crazy to hire line, and it was based on you would have an X and a Y axis, and the skills and the abilities of an individual versus their culture fit within an organization. And of course, if you had a scale of 1 to 10, a company would say, well, we're not hiring anyone who's less than a 4 on the skills and abilities area. So that rules out those candidates altogether. But the conclusion to my talk was always that if you hire for aptitude and culture fit, then you can train the other stuff. So we didn't mention it before, but to what degree is culture fit an overlap with what we're talking about here? Is it the same, different words?
I think that's massive, and I think it fits into sort of the blind recruiting models and the CV wallet models of candidate, and I own my own data, and the whole sort of DEI question, and it's something I find particularly interesting. Like, as an ex-educationist, I didn't used to walk into my classroom and say I need 10% more POCs, or I walked into my classroom with a focus on human capability identification and development. That was my job. And so suddenly when you're looking at a behavioral assessment, it creates access and opportunity for all. It the playing field, and essentially is ethical, because you could just recruit based on lumens. You could even remove the names. You could make them numerical. So for me, it's a really important way of tapping into untapped talent. And also for the candidate of self-representation in a way that's never happened before. And whilst, our competitor analysis has been pretty in-depth and huge respects, but I think that if you only have the one-off assessments, I don't see that how this can be extremely valuable process for making sure the sort of DEI stuff is covered and that people are being represented properly. And looking at we have a particular focus on early, late career and invisible workers, because it's easy to perform the value of this tool there. But essentially, this is a tool that should run through the whole life cycle from beginning to end of an employee.
As you touched on there on the DEI side of things, candidates who are, I'm a big proponent of considering candidates who were previously being disregarded, set aside. They don't have this, that, or the other, and including them in the process rather than excluding them. And this looks to really help there. On the evolution of the product and the platform, to what degree are you able to learn from the individuals going through your process? Is there AI in effect there, or machine learning, where you're building a stack of learned knowledge about the people who go through the platform?
Yeah, and so essentially what we're saying is our data, through careful opt-ins and all of the GDPR stuff, essentially what we're building is a database of behavioral measurements that should be open source, and the business model in the future can be that organizations come to that database. But essentially what we're saying is that if we're going to really look at fair access, fair and equal access, we have to create an opportunity for people to self-represent. There's many different business models in here, and we have a particular go-to-market strategy. But I think if we're doing blue sky thinking, and this is why I love what CV Wallet is doing, is essentially what you're saying is that this should be a data driven exercise. And if we create behavioral skills measurements in many different contexts, and suddenly we're in a different game where I opt into a recruitment data bank with these measurements, and then organizations to come to that data bank. It could be something internal, it could be something across organizations, it could be bigger than that. But essentially what we're saying is that this idea that there's, or as my intern, and she's doing a guest blog soon, I can't wait to get it out, but this idea of meritocracy. This idea that it's all it's all meritocratic and you just need to work hard enough, and actually I don't think it is. So if we level the playing field through creating access to measurements that can create in an open source data pool, then we can self-represent in a different way. Then people who might have been overlooked or found it hard to get access to employment may have opportunities they didn't have before.
So your company's come out of an incubator at Oxford University and is obviously born in the pandemic. What's the road ahead in the near and mid future for you?
Okay, so essentially at the moment we're just about to release beta where we have fully automated reporting. So we've been sort of holding on a little bit for that. I've also sort of been positioning sort of brand awareness, because I speak out, and I'm really trying to work out where you position this sort of truth teller in this space. Because for me, I've been doing a lot of work around looking at where the value is in this space. And so I have some pretty strong opinions about that. So essentially we're about to go to market, fully launched beta. We are building partnerships. We're looking very much at partnership model, because I think if we all start working together, if we find the value and then we connect the dots, we will create better experiences for candidates, and we will create better opportunities for them to self-represent and get better jobs, and organizations will have much more access to a bigger talent pool.
So when you're working in the HR and TA space as a technology company, people often, well, almost always, they look to companies in the space to represent well as an employer and build their values into their product. To what degree is that possible with yourself? Because there's a lot of education involved in letting people know what your product is able to do. But equally, you would want people to be more aware of their organization, their culture, the personality within their company, and you're in a position to help them, especially through the benchmarking of teams in a company. So, to what extent are you feeling the responsibility of educating people in this regard?
I don't know. I think sort of being too staunchly sort of gung-ho about education is, educating the market. I think actually there's demand for it in the market, and we're getting huge traction with talent acquisition managers and employer branders and so forth, because I think that people recognizing this place is pivoting. The key thing is to look at this idea of interoperability, this idea that recruitment is separate from employer branding, which is separate from candidate experience, and there's all of these solutions, sort of HR tech solutions, that offer different separate ideas of how you deal with that. Is where our key point of education or market awareness is coming in, is that these should all be joined up processes. And if they're not joined up processes, there should be partnerships in place that join it all up. This idea that you've got a tech stack and you're putting loads of stuff together and it's all complicated and you don't know which tech, I just think is a huge problem that we need to solve by just making it a very simple, straightforward process where people understand this should all be connected. And assessment, if it's done well, connects it all together.
So in terms of people knowing more about Lumenai, what would be the next steps for people to find out more?
Please feel free to contact me. I'm really happy. I'm sort of engaging. So at the moment, what we're doing is we're sort of early engagement. So we're building our beta users. We're building partnerships with recruitment platforms. ATS. recruiters, anyone
Yeah.
who's interested. And also what I'm really interested in is there's some super bright minds out there at the moment who are thinking along these lines. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to
Yeah.
connect with you. I'd love to run use cases with you. We are early stage, but the future is bright. And so as far as I'm concerned, just get in touch.
I thank you very much. I have to say it's a fascinating topic. It's a fascinating product, and I really want to know more. But I can totally see that the integration with these other platforms is a key route to market, and learning from the thousands of individuals who come through the platform. That's only going to make the the density, the richness of the value of the tool all the more important and valuable. So, Antonia, I'm going to say thank you very much. We've just come to time. It's been fascinating talk. I could talk and ask questions all afternoon if you'd let me, but we'll do that another time. Everyone who's joined us today, thank you very much for joining us. If you're watching us live or on replay or on any of the other social channels, then thank you. And we will be back in the next week with my colleague Peter has a show next week. Recruitment Ad Savvy is on next week. I have another Stepping Up show in 2 weeks' time. But in the meantime, thank you very much. Thank you again, Antonia, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.